Hi guys, welcome to this mini lecture. This lecture was created for patients as well as for health practitioners who are interested in understanding immunity. So there's a bit of basics going on over here, as well as how COVID-19 relates to immunity. And our immune system. In this time of uncertainty, and during times like this, we tend to seek information or seek things that provide us with certainty. And while these things might provide us with a bit of clarity, they may not always be grounded in reality. All right, so it may not be true. So I just want to caution people against very overly simplistic thinking, just like, oh, you take this for that, or there's a pill for this ill, or all right, the problem is this, so we just need to do this and things are solved. It's very tempting for us to kind of go into that train of thought, but I would encourage people to be, yes, open-minded, but doing so in grounded in some fundamentals. All right. So what I'm going to go through is some fundamentals of physiology, or things that we already know for sure about the human body and immunity. Let me just double check whether it's recording first. Okay, good, it's recording. So we're going to go through a few things today. We're going to go through the world we live in, our environment right now. Want to go through the immune system basics. So this will be the bulk of the presentation. We're going through the complications with COVID-19. And also, there is no such thing as immune support. What do I mean by that? By the end of this presentation, you should have some idea what I mean by that. So, what is the world we live in? There are some things that we need to accept. We live in a big world alongside with many different organisms. Right, so there are many unknowns and foreign things that are foreign to our bodies, and it's just natural, right? They are called commensal organisms. That means they live together with us. And the thing about these organisms is they tend to be opportunistic in nature. That means they would hang around you, but the moment your defense or your guard is down, they will take this opportunity to attack the body. Okay, so they are opportunistic in nature, and this includes all kinds of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi, even non-living molecules and non-living things, as we'll go through later. So I want to go through. So knowing that we live in this environment, that's where our immune system comes in. All right, this is very important. So these are the basics of the immune system. There are two parts to the immune system. There's the innate and the adaptive immune system. So it's important for us to understand this differentiation, because this will lead to the conclusion that I'm going to lead you to later. Right, so the innate immune system, it is the immune system that it is inborn. We are born with it. So it has the genetic memory of our forefathers to recognize things that are bad, that we know that are bad for us, and our body will very quickly be able to respond to this kind of organisms. Invading organisms. The second part is the adaptive immune system. This is the acquired immune system. So this is something that we acquire, that we get as we live in the world that we live in. Right? So there might be new, novel viruses, bacteria, or things that come into our environment, come into our life. That part of the immune system, the adaptive immune system, would seek to understand that it is foreign, and then take the necessary steps to act against it. So this is the acquired immune system. This one is specific, so it's specific to different organisms that comes in. The innate immune system is non-specific, so it would just eat up everything. Right? And then within the adaptive immune system, there are two pathways called the Th1 and Th2 pathways. More on this soon. So the innate immune system is our body's initial response, right, to eliminate any microbes and infection that come into our body. It happens within immediately or hours, so very quickly it can respond. And for those people who are interested in physiology out there, it does so via the complement cascade. Right, so it's a system. Complement cascade is the complement system is basically a system of plasma proteins that interacts with pathogens. It marks them for destruction by phagocytes, which are like the soldier cells, immune cells. So the soldiers, the phagocytes, would go to the marked pathogen and it will destroy it. right, via a system called the reactive oxygen species. More on that later. So this innate immune system allows us to recognize self and non-self. And of course, the non-self pathogen is the one that we're going to attack. Under the adaptive immune system, so this is the second part of the immune system we're talking about today, we have the Th1, which is the cellular pathway, cellular immune system, and the Th2 humoral immune system. So they operate differently. Okay, now, the first one operates via phagocytosis. Basically, it eats the cells. The second one operates by antibodies. So basically, it tags the receptor cells on the cell membrane with a certain kind of antibody, and it causes them to clump together. And this clumping, agglutination, will cause it to transport to certain cellular systems for destruction and for clearance. So for this adaptive system, adaptive immune system, the important thing to know is it takes 5 to 7 days after the first encounter of the new antigen for the immune system to reach full activity. This is also one of the reasons why a cold, the common cold that we experience, lasts for about a week, because it takes about that amount of time for it to reach full activity, and then it can fight the invading pathogen. Then the symptoms are able to go down. So this is a summary of the adaptive immune system, the second part, the first pathway and the second pathway. So Th1, cell-mediated, cell eat cell, right? It's cell eat cell, and the way it eats it is via basically chemical warfare, using this thing called the reactive oxygen species. The important thing to note is this pathway targets bacteria, viruses, and fungi. The Th2 pathway is antibody-mediated. So the antibodies the antibodies exist in the extracellular matrix. So you have the cells floating in a matrix, right? So these antibodies exist within that matrix, right? So it's extracellular, and this is the one where I talked about antibodies. So these are the ones that tend to target non-living things. So things like food protein, pollen, bad fats, and also heavy metals. So it tags them, causes them to clump together by a process called agglutination, and then it gets transported to the necessary systems for elimination. So there are different portals of entry. How does the virus come in? All right, that's a very good question. And we call this transmission vectors. These transmission vectors can be primary or it can be secondary. Primary refers to when the virus attacks you immediately, when the virus enters you immediately. Secondary is what happens when the virus or pathogen enters you, how does it spread? Okay, very much like a cancer cell, when it starts to spread to different systems in the body, it starts to basically take a ride on, for example, the blood circulation. So there are a few barriers in human beings. All right, the first line is the skin and mucous membranes. The skin mucous membranes are the mucous membranes exist within the nose, the nasal cavity, and also the upper respiratory tract. Second line will be the extracellular situation, and the third line is the cell membrane. So there's a journey that the virus or pathogen needs to take in order to get into your cell membrane. And once it gets there, that's when damage can happen. Once the damage happens, secondary spread can happen. Okay, so secondary spread happens when it hijacks the internal transportation infrastructure. So it takes a ride basically on your lymph system, on your blood circulation. Right? That's why the virus can travel to many different places. Now, the main problem happens when the virus gets into the cell. So a natural question to ask is, how does the virus get into the cell then? How does it get into the cell? It gets into the cell via the cell membrane. So this is the anatomy of an animal cell. So all the important mechanisms are within the cell itself. The nucleus and all the mitochondria, different protein-creating organelles are all within this cell. Protecting this cell is a barrier called your cell membrane. Viruses have to enter this cell membrane in order to enter the cell via the cell membrane. And the area inside the cell is a very tightly regulated area. All right, it's a very tightly regulated, highly controlled area. It's very sensitive because there are a lot of important mechanism and machinery that keeps the cell running healthily. So it's not easy to get into the cell. Okay. In order to get in, you have to get in through doors. So on the surface of the cell, if you can imagine, I'll show you a close-up later, there are different doors where particles, organisms can get in. And you need the appropriate key and to the appropriate door to get in. Hopefully you are able to understand so far. I will start talking a little bit faster because we've got quite a lot to go through. Hopefully you can get it. Right, so on the cell membrane, there are many doors with many different keys. So all the doors and keys are different for all the different cell types in the body. So if a cell does not have that particular door for the virus to get in, right, the virus has a key to a certain door, and if that cell does not even have the door, the virus can't even get in. Okay? This is something that we already know. I talk about this ACE2 receptors because this is the name of one of the door of the cell membrane. Okay? So this door, the ACE2 receptors, ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. So this is one of the door that we know that the COVID virus uses to get in. This is the similar door used by the SARS virus. Right? So the technical name for COVID-19 is actually SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so COVID-19 refers to the date, the year that it was discovered, not the iteration of the virus. All right, so don't mistake that. There's a unique feature about the ACE receptors. So I'll show you the membrane and how the ACE receptor looks like. Right, so if you can see this line here, this is the cell membrane. So imagine this is the outside of the cell, this is the inside of the cell. In order for viruses to get in, this is the ACE2, this is the door. Right, so the virus needs to enter via the ACE2 receptor, then it can go into the cell and wreak all the damage. Okay. So why is COVID-19 so devastating? There are many viruses that exist, right, in the world, commensal organisms. That's what I talked about in the first slide. Why is COVID-19 so devastating? It's because of the door it chose to hack. Right, so it accesses a particular system in the body that affects many organs. Okay. So so backing up, the reason why this system is important is the ACE2 receptor, this door, exists on many of the organs related to this system. Right, so it's easy for the virus to invade this system because through that door. So virus gets in and affects this system. This is called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. This is a hormone system. It regulates blood pressure, fluid and electrolyte balance. It also regulates systemic vascular resistance. Right, so blood pressure, how fast your blood can flow through your blood vessels, vascular resistance. The organs involved in this system are below: lungs, kidney and adrenals, your liver, your blood vessels, and your brain. So once you see this list, you can understand why COVID, in the beginning they thought it was more of a respiratory distress problem. So mostly the problem happens in the lungs when you get pneumonia, and then the complications happen there. Right now, there's emerging evidence that shows that it is not just the lungs that get affected, but people with kidney problems, people with liver problems, all the way up to brain problems as well. And also a side note, I think I have a slide showing you later that the door, the ACE2 receptor, can also be found in the intestinal epithelia, which is your small and large intestine. Right, so that's one of the reasons why scientists were thinking, okay, the spread may not just be shedding of the virus via the upper respiratory tract when you cough, but the spread of the virus could be shedding from the other end as well. Okay, so these are the organs involved in the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Okay, so these are the receptor sites I was talking about, intestinal epithelia. So type 2 alveolar cells are the cells within the lungs. right near the ends of the capillary tree, the bronchial tree in the lungs, and I'll show you a picture of that later. It's found in vascular tissue, liver, kidney, and also the intestinal epithelia. The number of receptor sites, so the number of doors on your cell membrane is determined by genetics. Obviously, when you talk about genetics, there's also epigenetics, so your environment that influence the expression of genes. So your environment could also influence the number of receptor sites, right, that you have on the cell membrane. But epigenetics is a big topic for another discussion, right? So let's just assume that it's genetically determined first, right? And the number of receptor sites, the number of doors you have on the cell membrane will determine how long patients can remain asymptomatic. Because if you have many doors on the cell membrane, the virus can get in faster. But if you have lesser doors, it takes more time for the virus to get in and to replicate and then to damage the cell. Okay? So these are the receptor sites for ACE2. ACE2. Let's talk about viral replication. So how does the virus replicate? Okay, I won't go into viral mechanisms actually. We'll talk about transmission vectors. We talk about asymptomatic patients and why. And actually now I rather talk about how people die. What are the complications? Because you have many viruses living on your body. We live in a world with many viruses. Not all of them kill us. All right. So why is this so dangerous? So this is what, of course, the research is still out there. The knowledge of the virus is still evolving. So this is what we just know for now. Okay. And we are in May 2020 at the moment of this recording. So one of the reasons why the virus can cause complications in the body is due to this thing called the cytokine storm. Okay, how do people die? All right, this is a caveat. All right, so the virus is mutating, so this will complicate things further. Virulence, so how infectious it is, it can shift as well, and how it affects the body, and what systems it hijacks, it can shift over time as well. So that's a caveat. So people die through this thing called the cytokine storm, right? A cytokine storm is a storm of inflammatory substances that flood the body, and it is these substances that attacks the tissue and causes problems. So let's take it chronologically, okay? So from virus coming in and virus replication and virus spread. So how does it happen? We start from the virus replication stage. This occurs over a period of several days. So once you get infected by the virus via a primary spread, there is an innate immune response that your body mounts. Okay, so it happens, but it fails to contain the virus because the virus is multiplying too quickly. So this accounts for the relatively mild symptoms that may occur in the beginning, right? So the symptoms are due to direct cytopathic effects. Cytopathic means structural changes. So the virus itself causes the changes in the cell and damages the cell. All right. So this is, and the cell gets damaged, and the symptoms come from there. So this is very mild. What happens is when it fails to contain the virus, what happens? It comes over time. The adaptive immune response will eventually kick into gear. So we have the two immune systems, the innate immune system as well as the adaptive immune system. Innate is the one that within hours. The adaptive immune system takes some time to kick into gear. So once it kicks into gear, all right, the viral load will start to decrease. So they call it the viral titer. So the number of virus in the body, all right, starts to decrease. But and this is a very important thing to note. This may also increase the level of inflammatory cytokines. All right, cytokine refers to the same cytokine as cytokine storm. So this inflammatory cytokines will lead to tissue damage, and this tissue damage will eventually lead to the clinical manifestations. So what are inflammatory cytokines? what are the elements of the storm. So an inflammatory cytokine is a kind of signaling molecule that's secreted by the immune cells, right? And when this signaling molecule is released, it would cause certain cell types to promote inflammation, all right? So it will cause the body to mount an attack, right? And if there's too much of these molecules that signal the body to mount an attack, the attack can be too much, okay? And when the attack is too much, you have problems, right? So all you need to know here is that cytokine, the purpose of cytokines are to promote cell death, and ideally the death of cells that are non-self and cells that are damaging to the body, pathogens. So an example of accelerated cell death that happens in the lungs, and this is one of the main reasons why people have complications, is when you have many cells kind of dying at the same time, a lot of tissue accumulates. Okay, in COVID-19, one of the targets is the lung tissue in the alveoli. So if you look over in the diagram here, this is the small little air sacs. Okay, so how do we get oxygen into the body? We breathe in, and oxygen goes into these air sacs, and there's a diffusion that takes place. Now, if there's a lot of tissue damage and a lot of debris building up, okay, this is what happens over here. It fills up the air sacs, and the amount of surface area that the body has to absorb and diffuse the oxygen into the body goes down. That's why you see a lot of patients, they have hypoxia, so lowered oxygen concentration levels in the body. Right, so this is one of the complications of the cytokine storm. There are a few effects of this storm. It can cause clotting, shock, lung injury, cell death, immune paralysis, renal failure. Ultimately, the storm itself is a very complicated storm, and it's a cycle. Ultimately, it leads to inflammation, organ failure, and infection. It can be secondary infection as well. Now, a common question that has popped up recently because of COVID-19 and its relationship to immune system is this product, or is this supplement, or is this food, or is this thing good for the immune system, right? So I've put there the number of some of the emails that I received, like protect our immune system against the coronavirus, all right? 10 quarantine drinks that boost your immune system. Well, you can probably tell where I'm going with this. Be wary of it, okay? Because if someone asks you, especially if you're a health practitioner, is this good for the immune system? The next question you need to ask them, you need to tell them it's not yes or no, but you need to ask which part of the immune system. So this is the clinical thinking that you need to have. Which part of the immune system? We now know that we have an innate immune system, and we know that we have an acquired immune system. So which part do we want to support? So in a sense, there's no such thing as immune support. Okay, there's no such thing as that. You need to consider, does the patient have lowered immune system function, or do they have an overactive immune system function? Right? An example of the overactive immune system function is the cytokine storm. Right? So if that's the case, and if they're in that stage, would it be wise to support the immune system? It's questionable. And some patients can have a combination of both as well. So it seems prudent at this time to maintain a good innate, the first one, innate immune system to help prevent infections such as COVID-19. And the key word is prevent, okay? But on the other end of the spectrum, it may be questionable to strongly support the adaptive immune system in these patients because you might be pouring oil on fire, adding oil to fire, and making the cytokine storm even worse. Okay? So what to do now? The main thing to do now, because we don't know give me a second, okay? Because we don't know a lot about the virus, right? So the best thing we can do now is to avoid getting it until we understand more. Okay, a common concern that people have is, or a common thing that people bring up is, children. So right now it appears that kids, children, and even middle-aged people, people who are relatively fit, they're not symptomatic. They seem to handle the virus very well. The thing is, we really do not know enough about the virus. All right. So, for example, another kind of virus that I can use is the herpes virus. Right. So that's the virus that you get in chickenpox. So in kids, when you have it, yeah, you can deal with it, no problem. Your immune system deals with it. But what happens when you get chickenpox as an adult? What is it called? It's called shingles. Okay, so it's called shingles when it happens when you're an adult. So the thing is, what we know now about the herpes virus in chickenpox situation is we know where it lives. So it lives in this thing called the dorsal root ganglion. So it's within the spinal cord, right? It stays there lying dormant. So, and it is opportunistic, right? So the moment your immune system goes down to a certain level, it seizes the opportunity and it comes out. And because we already know for chickenpox and shingles virus, we already know that it lives within the dorsal root ganglia. Whenever it comes out, it will go and follow the path of that nerve. So you can see in patients with shingles, you can see actually the infection follow, you can trace where the infection is and which nerve it's affecting because that's where the virus lives. So we know that about the chickenpox virus, the herpes virus, but we do not know anything about the COVID. It's not that we don't know anything, but we don't know enough about it. So we don't know what happens if your kid is infected with the virus now, what will happen in the future if there's any reinfection or if there's any manifestation of it, right? Because shingles in adults and chickenpox in kids, in adults, those who have shingles will know that you suffer a lot more, okay? So that's the reason why, for now, common sense is to avoid getting it until we understand more. All right, and also above, one of the slides said support the innate immune system. I won't go into the recommendations there because that's not the purpose of today's lecture. All right, it's more for you to understand, get an overview of the immune system, and more importantly, differentiate between the two parts of the immune system. Okay, how do we avoid getting it? WHO has a lot of recommendations out there already. I won't go through it in detail. Hand washing is very important. Mask wearing is important. And I want to add a comment about mask wearing because there are some studies that show that even with a mask, the virus still can go through the mask, right? But the more important thing with COVID especially is the problem with cross-contamination. That's the reason why hand washing is the number one recommendation, right? So the good thing about wearing mask is it gives you consciousness about your face area. For practitioners, health practitioners, if you're wearing gloves, it gives you consciousness about your hands. So when you're wearing gloves, you're less likely to touch your face or you're less likely to cross-contaminate surfaces because there's gloves on already. So mask wearing has that same effect also. Okay, aside from providing at least some sort of barrier to aerosol spread. The last thing is also general health, right? So things like these are the broad pillars of health. If you've been to any of my live seminars before in person, I will talk about the 3 pillars of health: eating, thinking, and moving. Right, so these are massive pillars. There are a lot of things, a lot of detail and strategies. We can go into every one of them. Maybe in the future we can cover them. All right, but basically, these are the things you can focus on. And to add on to that, sleep. So right now, a lot of us are at home. We have potentially more control over our time. I'm aware of people who have kids at home and who actually might have less time right now. Right, but it doesn't change the fact that sleep is very important also. Okay, so I wrote something about sleep. I want to mention it. Let's see. Right, so it's not just the amount of sleep that you get; it's the quality, the quantity, and the regularity of sleep that's important. Okay, so you want to maintain some sort of routine and some sort of cycle, right, to to keep your body kind of grounded, to keep your body grounded, especially in this changing times. All right, so general health advice, follow them. Okay. So these are the references that we have. I'm going to leave this up here for now for those who want to go and do further reading. You can take a screenshot. Okay, and that comes to the end of this mini lecture. Hopefully it has been informative. I hope it didn't confuse you, but I just want to re-emphasize that yes, right now we are seeking for the easiest explanation. We want to see a nice, pretty infographic that tells you exactly what to do. Okay, eat this or take that. Right, now I know exactly what I need to do. Unfortunately, reality, that may not be the case. And in this case, it definitely is not the case. Right, so it is important to have a foundation in things that we already know, which is physiology of the immune system and fundamentals of health. Right, so this, everything I presented today, nothing is new, right? The innate and acquired immune system, these are all very established already. Right, so if you do have any questions, oh yeah, let me summarize, okay? So I summarized by, this is what we talked about, the world that we live in, talked about commensal organisms, pathogens, viruses. We got to accept that we just live in this world, okay, that has all these organisms. We live together with all these organisms. That's why the immune system is important. I went through the basics of the immune system, two parts of the immune system, the complications with COVID-19. If you want to Google anything, one of the keywords is cytokine storm, right? So you can go down the rabbit hole with that. And I'm happy to have conversations with that, with any health practitioner if you're interested in that as well. So cytokine storm is the one that causes the complication. Also, there is no such thing as immune support, because which part of the immune system are you supporting? All right, so that comes to the end of our mini lecture. Hopefully this helps, and I look forward to seeing you when this circuit breaker is lifted.